Getting rid of a Necron is one thing, keeping it down is another. Because what if every artifact you pulled back from the graveyard created even more Necron Warriors? That's exactly what Imotekh does best, and once the machines start returning, the tables start turning. Hi everyone, I'm Full Harmonicon and welcome back to the channel. Today we're talking about one of the strongest, most accomplished Necron overlords in the galaxy. He raises armies of undead machines and pushes them beyond their normal limits. It's time for order, unity, and obedience with Imotekh the Stormlord. And if you enjoy playing a bunch of artifacts, building an undead robot army, and overwhelming the table with hard-to-kill clankers, this deck is for you. Imotekh is a 4-mana 3/3 legendary artifact Necron creature. His first ability is Pharaon. Whenever one or more artifact cards leave your graveyard, you create 2/2/2 black Necron Warrior artifact creature tokens. Then he has Grand Strategist. At the beginning of combat on your turn, another target artifact creature we control gets +2/+2 and gains menace until end of turn. So, every time we pull an artifact from the graveyard, we build the army. The artifact doesn't even need to return directly to the battlefield. It can go to our hand, be cast from the graveyard, or leave in another way. As long as it leaves, Imotekh gives us another 2 warriors. Then, Imotekh turns one of those machines into a much more threatening attacker. If you enjoy synergy-focused commander breakdowns like this, hit that subscribe. There's a lot more on the way. The strategy here is super straightforward. First, we fill the battlefield with artifacts and artifact creatures while placing useful cards into the graveyard. Then, we get Imotekh online and repeatedly move artifacts out of the graveyard to create more Necron Warriors. Finally, we win through combat by buffing our growing army and overwhelming our opponents with a swarm of Necrons. Let's start with the machines that support the plan. Imotekh Lord is, well, a lord, and one of the best ways to finish the game. It buffs our Necron Warrior tokens and gives them menace, making your opponent's blocks incredibly awkward. Sarak, the Silent King, mills us for 3 whenever he attacks, then lets us return an artifact creature milled this way to our hand. That fills the graveyard, gives us the card back, and can trigger Imotekh for another 2 warriors. Crypto Thrall protects our board by making our artifact creatures much harder to target. That protection becomes extremely valuable once our army is established. Royal Warden has Unearth, so it brings itself back from the graveyard and triggers Imotekh. When it enters, it also creates 2 more 2/2 Necron Warriors, giving us a way to build the army in no time. Cryptek gives us repeatable recursion and protection by returning another artifact creature from our graveyard at the end step after it dies and triggers Imotekh as it comes back. Psychomancer drains our opponents whenever our non-token artifacts leave the battlefield. That gives us some insurance against sacrifice effects and board wipes, because even when our machines disappear, our opponents still pay for it. Biotransference is a huge synergy piece. It turns our creatures into artifacts in every zone, allowing many more cards to work with Imotekh's trigger. It also creates a Necron Warrior whenever we cast an artifact spell. Their number is Legion creates a massive burst of Necron Warriors and gains life equal to the number of artifacts we control. We can completely rebuild our board or create a lethal army on the spot. Sculpting Steel simply copies the best artifact on the battlefield, and that includes artifacts controlled by our opponents. Cranial Plating can make one creature terrifying in a deck with as many artifacts as this. Imotekh can then give that creature another +2/+2 and menace, making it even more difficult to block. Now, let's look at ways of triggering Imotekh even more. Recursion the Traveler allows us to cast an artifact from our graveyard whenever it attacks, turning the graveyard into an extra hand and giving us a repeatable Imotekh trigger. Technomancer mills 3 cards when it enters, then returns artifact creatures with a total mana value of 6 or less from the graveyard to the battlefield. That can create a huge swing in both value and board presence. Tortured Existence does an incredible amount of work. For just 1 black mana, we discard a creature and return another creature from the graveyard to our hand. which means we can repeatedly trigger Imotekh for another 2 warriors. Near Retriever, Junk Diver, and Workshop Assistant are artifact creatures that return another artifact from the graveyard to our hand when they die. Together, they can create excellent army building loops. Scrap Trawler pushes that even further by allowing our artifacts to return cheaper artifacts from the graveyard whenever they die. Recursion Orb and Nim Deathmantle both let us pay 4 mana to return an equipped creature after it dies. They cost 4 to reattach, meaning we can set up the same recursion again. And of course, Reanimate, Dread Return, and Victimize bring back our best creatures and keep the graveyard engine moving. Artifact decks have plenty of ways to keep the hand full. Triarch Praetorian has Unearth, and if it entered from the graveyard, we draw 2 cards. That replaces itself while also triggering Imotekh. Chronomancer lets us sacrifice another artifact to draw a card, which is perfect when so many of our artifacts are happy to end up in the graveyard. Canoptek Spider draws whenever another non-token artifact enters under our control, so repeatedly casting and recurring artifacts can generate lots of cards. Mystic Forge lets us cast artifact spells from the top of our library while also letting us exile the top card when it's getting in the way. Training Post gives us a flexible toolbox. It's an artifact itself, can discard an artifact from our hand, return an artifact from the graveyard, or sacrifice an artifact to draw a card. Monumental Corruption can draw a huge burst of cards or take a serious chunk out of an opponent's life total, making it card advantage or a surprise finisher. Ripples of Undeath fills our graveyard, then lets us pay 1 mana and 3 life to return one of the milled cards to our hand. If that card's an artifact, we also trigger Imotekh. Necrons also have some excellent interaction pieces. Necron Deathmark destroys a creature when it enters, then allows us to mill ourselves for 3, setting up more artifacts to recur. Canoptek Tomb Sentinel exiles a non-land permanent if it entered from the graveyard. It also has Unearth, so it can bring itself back, trigger Imotekh, and remove something important. Locust Heavy Destroyer makes each opponent sacrifice a creature when it enters. Unearth means we can use that effect again while creating even more Necrons. Canoptek Scarab Swarm attacks an opponent's graveyard and creates 1/1 flying insect artifact creature tokens based on the lands and artifacts exiled, disrupting them while widening our board. Their Name is Death is a one-sided board wipe in this deck, destroying non-artifact creatures while leaving most of our army untouched. Armix Filigree Thrasher lets us discard a card when it attacks, then gives a creature -X/-X based on the artifact we control and the artifact cards in our graveyard. Noxious Gearhulk destroys a creature when it enters, gaining us some life and giving us another powerful artifact creature to reanimate. Archenemy's Charm gives us flexibility. We can exile a creature or a planeswalker, or return up to 2 creatures from our graveyard to our hand. That second mode normally triggers Imotekh. Living Death clears away the creatures on the battlefield and brings back the creatures from each graveyard. Since we're actively filling our grave, this normally leaves us pretty far ahead. Now luckily for us, ramp in mono black normally looks like artifacts anyway. Illuminor Seraz lets us sacrifice another creature for black mana equal to its mana value, giving us a burst of mana while placing an artifact creature into the graveyard. Canoptek Wraith sacrifices itself to find 2 basic swamps. It ramps us and it puts an artifact creature into the grave that we can recur later. The Soulstone is honestly excellent here. Early on, it's an indestructible mana rock. Later, it reanimates a creature and helps us grow the army with more Necron Warriors. Scepter of Eternal Glory taps for 3 black mana once we control 3 or more lands with the same name, which is easy in a mono-black deck full of swamps. Solemn Simulacrum adds to our artifact count, finds a basic land, and gives us more value when it dies. Wayfarer's Bauble, once to be sacrificed, it puts a land onto the battlefield and then waits in the graveyard as a useful artifact to return later. Then, the usual mana rocks also increase our artifact count. Soul Ring, Arcane Signet, and Thought Vessel are all great here. And finally, a few lands that help support the plan. Vault of Whispers is an artifact land, naturally increasing our artifact count. Tomb Fortress lets us mill 4 cards and return a creature from the graveyard to the battlefield. If that creature is an artifact, which it probably is, it triggers Imotekh and creates 2 more warriors. Buried Rune sacrifices itself to return any artifact from our graveyard to our hand. Takenuma, Abandoned Maya, can be discarded to mill 3 cards and return a creature or planeswalker to our hand, which gives us another pair of warriors. Imotekh the Stormlord is such a cool take on the artifact archetype. Instead of simply playing artifacts for value, he rewards us for pulling them out of the graveyard by building an army of Necron Warriors along the way. His combat ability also helps artifact creatures pressure opponents, giving something +2/+2 and menace every turn, creates difficult blocks, and turns our value engine into a real win condition. The deck can grind incredibly well, constantly recycling artifacts, rebuilding important pieces, and growing the board every time something returns. If you enjoy artifact decks that always seem to have something happening in the graveyard, Imotekh is a really fun commander to build around. Thanks so much for watching. If this breakdown helped you, hit that like, subscribe for more synergy-focused commander content, and leave a comment with a card you think I missed. Channel members help vote on future videos, and the full deck list along with my TCG Player affiliate link is down below. Consider watching another breakdown on screen, and until next time, may all your artifacts come back from the grave.